this is the kickoff to the CxXchange SuccessHour industry series, which I'm so excited to say this is over a year in the making. We're kicking it off by discussing why does CS look different in every company, right? And you know, you probably hear this a lot. I know I certainly have. People have tried to tell me that there's no real way that CS departments are really supposed to be set up, or that whole, you know, post-sales motions, like, it's different everywhere. You know, it's just whatever you make of it. It's like, no, there's frameworks, there's all these things that you want to do. And so I'm excited to dig into this topic with you. And now I want to introduce Tali Segev and Raia, Raia, excuse me. I'm
It's a lot of
catching
vowels.
myself
It's
on
okay.
that. I know. I always want to call you Raia. It's Raia. So
Most people do. It's all right.
Tali Segev and Raia. Let's go ahead and I'll stop sharing for a second. Now I know that folks may be more familiar with Ty, but because he's presented and co-led sessions here before, but Tali is someone that's probably new to you. She's not new to me. I've known her a couple, 3 years maybe ago.
Yeah.
We first met, and I was a coach to Tali when she was first switching over from health tech into health tech CS. And at some point, a little over a year ago, she said, Jan, can you introduce me to other health tech leaders and that are in CS? I really want to exchange ideas. And that is where the idea was born. Because if you just put a kernel in my head, I'll kind of explode from there, right? But anyway, so now this is why we're bringing the whole industry series to you. And I'm so excited about that. So Tali, why don't you start off and then we'll go over to Ty.
Sure. Hi, everyone. It's so exciting to be here and to see this many faces. I haven't been in the SuccessHour in so long because of time zones, and I'm blown away by this crowd, especially during a holiday week. So thank you all for being here. I'm Tali. My background's in healthcare. I transitioned from healthcare about 8 years ago into my current company. I was the first employee there, so we really built it from the ground up in the health tech space. And then, as Jan said, a few years ago, once we were transitioning out of the quick and dirty startup mode and trying to actually put positions and departments in place, that's when I started building the CS department at my company and started working with Jan, who really helped us build all of the processes and workflows that we have today. And just from that, I've been spending so much of my time connecting what I learned from Jan with our coaching sessions into the health tech space, into the healthcare space. It's a challenging space and industry to be in, as I'm sure so many of the industries that you're all in has its own challenges. And I'm really, really excited to talk about this today and in this whole series with all of you.
Awesome. Ty?
Yeah. So I know some of you have heard my story before, but I've launched CS teams at SaaS companies for years. And when I moved into cybersecurity, I ran into a lot of issues that I was not expecting. And basically things were really different. So one of the first things I did, which is why I'm so glad this series is kicking off, is I got together a group of about 10 folks who were VPs and directors already in cybersecurity and customer success. I did a roundtable with them, took a series of notes, and basically built what I'm doing today off the foundations of that. And so I'm hoping that this series will kind of lean into that so that other people can also get that quick start by kind of leveraging the network that is CxXchange.
That's right, Ty. I remember back in our Gain, Grow, Retain days when we first met, you did start up sort of an offshoot where was everybody talking about cyber and cybersecurity. And yeah, that's the power of community, right? Is getting together and exchanging ideas and learning from each other. And definitely what we want to do here today. So if you haven't noticed over in the chat, what we have is some links for the slides, which also have some resources, as well as also the breakout notes. And so be sure to download those. And let's go ahead and I'll share my screen again and we'll dig in to the topic here. So today what we want to do is actually talk about, some of the CS fundamentals and variables that we see. And this is something that, for me, being a consultant and coach, I see quite frequently, because I work with people. I walk in the door and it might be, SaaS tech for veterinarians, or fintech, or, like cyber, or like so many different things that, like, I walk in the door and I'm like, I don't know anything about your industry, but let me tell you about something about CS, right? It's like, let's kick the tires on your CS program. And so regardless of the type of industry, there are some key things. And can everybody see my screen? Did I not? I did. Good. Sometimes I don't share it, so I'm just checking here. So I did share my screen. Good. So some of the things that are constants, right? And this can be done by lots of different types of teams in an organization. Sometimes they are in-house teams. Sometimes they are external teams. Like when you look at onboarding, sometimes onboarding can be done by a channel partner, or if you have other types of partnerships, right? Sometimes they do the onboarding. Sometimes you go ahead and farm out onboarding as much as possible and try to keep your team small, right? That can happen as well. So it might be less in your control, but still somehow they can be onboarded. I remember when I was talking to a founder once, and I was giving him sort of like, okay, well, let's take a look. And I was sort of assuming that there would be like a 30-day onboarding. And he was like, whoa, what are you talking about? If it doesn't happen in 20 minutes, like that's too long. I've missed the chance, right? So that gets into variabilities of complexity, right? But in any event, onboarding of some sort, implementation of some sort happens. Then adoption, that change management process, right? Where the customer has to change their ways and start to use your product. At some point, there's a renewal. It might be an auto renewal. It might be monthly. It might be annual. You might have 3 or 5 or 10-year, contracts. So that might look differently, but some sort of renewal needs to take place. Some sort of optimization, right? If the customer isn't optimizing using your product, then chances are they're not ready to expand and use more of your product, of your current product, or cross-sell to another product, or they may not be very good advocates for you as you try to sell your product into another division. If, let's say, it's an enterprise, right? So optimization, expansion, advocacy, all of these are motions. Now, you as a CSM team, you may or may not be commercial CSMs. You may or may not be doing the contracts, but you probably have some role in getting the customer ready to be able to do that expansion or advocacy, right? And so an advocacy might be handled by your marketing team. But if you don't set them up properly, then there's no way to hand them off to marketing or sales or account management or renewals manager. And in some of those cases, it might be handing it over to a sales team where all commercials happen out of the sales wing, or it could be that all of those things happen, within your own post-sales team, but still you might have a renewals or account manager within post-sales. So these things can get divided up, or you might be wearing all of those hats, right? Sometimes too, then you might be wearing the support hat. That's certainly part of what happens in the post-sales motion. It isn't necessarily a stage, because support happens, right? Support happens throughout. So anyway, so that's just the first thing I would just want to mention, is all of those things, whether any of it gets farmed out into third parties or partners, or if you're doing it yourself or within your team or within another team, basically these things happen as part of the customer journey. If you're going to step into their shoes, if you're going to put their hats on and experience what needs to happen as they're using your product, all of these things are things that customers are doing. Another thing, just going through some of these things like business maturity. This is something where we were talking about, if you're VC invested, you probably are thinking of it as like seed, startup, growth, expansion, maturity, and exit. If you're not venture capital invested, you are at the very least thinking about it in terms of the product market fit stage, your go-to-market fit stage, scaling, productivity, and sustainability, right? So these are some of the things we want to just have as like your foundations. And then from there, we want to dig into what are some of the variables, right? And so now I'm going to get Tali and Ty involved, but also if anybody, of course, as usual in our SuccessHour session, if you have something you want to either ask a question about or make a comment on, please feel free to raise your hand and chime in as well. So with the variables where we're looking at whether it's complex or simple or self-serve, sales models, there can be different types of sales models, industry, sometimes the industry impacts what sort of customer base you have. And then there can also be different sort of regulations and legal requirements. So do you want to, Tali, do you want to maybe kick off talking a little bit about some of these variabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you jump to the next slide, actually, these are the ones that Ty and I spoke about a lot when preparing for this. And it's immediately what comes to my mind. Like when I asked Jan, can I connect with other health tech leaders? I'm thinking about these pieces, implementation. Who else has gone through an Epic integration? What was that like? How do we make this easier on the team? Questions like that. For ROI business value, being able to really understand the financial models of our customers. And that really is industry specific to be able to follow, Epic as in the EHR. So really, being able to follow the money of each customer and each business model to create those ROI stories is so industry specific. And same with the stakeholders and the personas, working with clinicians versus government people, and every industry has their own language that they're speaking. So those are the things that we were thinking about.
I want to just ask you to speak a little bit more about Epic and EHR.
Sure. So most of our healthcare customers have all the patient data stored in the electronic health records. And this is a really complex system, and each one is very difficult to integrate into. It's really these monopolies within the healthcare system. And every customer requires a very intricate integration with a lot of HIPAA and patient health information concerns. And so with each customer, when we go into that, if we are conducting an integration with the electronic health record, first of all, that can extend it by 9 months to a year, versus if we're starting with no integration, we still need to learn how to plug into their system of EHRs.
So why would you call it Epic? So why would you call it Epic though?
Epic is the top, I'm sorry for using the industry language already off the bat, but Epic is the top electronic health record in America. And so the majority of hospitals today use Epic. And so that's one example even of coming in and speaking the language of the industry when working with customers and just really having that industry specific knowledge.
Got it. See, this is where like we get, look at this. And we have people who already know about it and have been putting in the chat, epic.com and all of that.
Mm-hmm. So if any of you have my chart, that's an example of something through Epic.
Oh,
right. Nice. All right. Ty, what are some of the variables that you found? Because I know you've been in different industries, some more HR related and some more or I don't know if you call it HR or something else, but anyway, maybe you can speak to what the different industries are referred to and some of the surprises you had when you switched industries.
Yeah, so one of the big surprises is the availability of data, right? So a lot of my customers, I'd say well over 50%, are uh, behind walls that I will never see by design, right? I'll never see that data even if I ask for it, even if I ask for it in a secure way. So I need to create models that can show business value without ever seeing how they're using the tool. The second that in securities, right, we're having to show give a positive number to a negative effect. How do I show that 0 things were prevented? Right? It's a difficult proposition. A lot of people use insurance models, just FYI, to resolve around that. And then again, talking about industry, Tali, I know you and I both have this, which is, Jan, I know you'd mentioned once upon a time, right? Like everyone sells, and sometimes we can't, right? Sometimes if we're in certain government contracts, we're actually barred from selling. We can only talk about what exists within that contract. We can't talk about any other offers or products. So we have a lot more limitation in that regard.
Right. And that's something that struck me when I was talking to somebody in health tech. And you know me, I'm all about, commercial CSMs, and you're part of the revenue, motion and all these things. And it was like, yeah, I can't sell. We would get in trouble for selling, right? And so what are all the things you're doing then if you're not selling? And there is quite a bit that we're doing that helps to set up that sale. But it's definitely kind of shined a light for me. It's like, there's other perspectives and other reasons for those other perspectives, right? Also, what about stakeholders and personas? Because we have like B2B to C, which can be very unique when we're looking at health tech. And then there's B2B to B and B2B. And what do I mean by all of these numbers and letters anyway?
My company today is B2B to patient. And so we sell into the health systems. Our users are the clinicians and the doctors and the administrative staff at hospitals and health systems. And then our end product connects with the patients themselves. And so learning the stakeholder landscape, first of all, plugging into a nursing team and a clinical team, they are so rightfully so cautious and protective of their patients. They're experiencing huge burnout. They could be a little nervous about the changing job landscapes and AI coming in and taking their jobs, which I'm sure is actually a commonality among a lot of our industries. And then getting to know the patient. So making sure we have the right people on the team to connect with our end users as well. I think B2B to C in general is such an interesting use case when it comes to stakeholders, because you really need to be the expert on 2 groups. And in our case, that's the clinicians and the patients.
Right. So a different type of B2B to C, certainly.
Right.
And Randy, I'm so glad you raised your hand because you're over in FinTech, right? Oh, you're on mute.
I was going to kind of bring that up. So you think about, I mean, another way I kind of look at this is another variables like constraints, right? If you're in the financial community, you have regulatory constraints, or you mentioned obviously the HIPAA, when it comes to patient data. So I assume that would be another variable, arguably. Okay. So I was just kind of thinking of just different intangibles of aspects you have to identify when you're trying to understand your clients, and arguably what data you can get access to, or what data arguably you'd want to be able to look at that could be constrained based on a regulatory body, or obviously a certain aspect that you don't have access to, or you have to be very careful how you access it.
And how has that impacted you as you've been working in FinTech? And did you ever work outside of FinTech, or have you always been focused on FinTech?
I've primarily been in the FinTech financial industry my whole career. So it's always been just top of mind when you work with clients to understand that the financial regulatory bodies are a byproduct of everything you have to be aware of when you're dealing with customers. Understand that the ability for clients to do certain things is always going to be driven by their the regulatories that they have to adhere to. And so you're always aware of that and just know that's just a byproduct of how you work with them.
Right. Ty, did you have anything that you wanted to add in here, especially as you get into some of the stakeholders, personas, language?
Sure, yeah. So working in mostly SaaS prior to this, right? Stakeholders were usually pretty business management level. Here, they're far more technical. They want to get down to the nitty gritty really quick. They are pretty impervious to anything that seems like sales. And frankly, if you don't speak the language, they don't talk to you. They're pretty abrupt that way.
So that must have been a rude awakening when you first moved over.
Yeah, sure was. Yeah, I had to learn quick.
Nice. You know, another thing too, when you think about the maturity, you know, like the maturity of your own company, but also like of your industry. When I think about when I was in blockchain, right? And when you mentioned sort of the IT, you know, very highly technical folks, when I was in blockchain, you know, it was primarily they were trying to get people to use the blockchain, you know, whatever blockchain they were trying to basically sell in and build communities. And it was all around developers, right? And so you had to very much know that language and that whole ecosystem in order to understand how to speak to those stakeholders, right? And it was almost too early for CS in that respect, just because it was so early in kind of what they were building. But
On that note,
Yeah.
this next slide,
yeah,
so we kind of talked about language and regulation, but
Mhm.
tools is another place where Tali and I definitely connected because of a lot of the privacy with both HIPAA and cybersecurity regulations, right? Oftentimes we can't use things that are really great, like AI recordings. There's a reason I'm tethered in. There's a lot of like ITAR, I have to be tethered in, so I'm just tethered in all the time. So there's a lot of cool
Tethered
innovation that's,
in. Wait.
yeah, I'm hardwired in. I
Okay.
can't use Bluetooth. But there's a lot of really great things that are developing in places like AI that we simply cannot use. And the violations for that would be millions of dollars. So we're pretty pretty stringent about it.
Right. Yeah, that definitely has an impact on your bottom line there.
Yeah, that's probably where I feel the most FOMO is with all those digital tools that we can't implement because of HIPAA.
Wow. That's really something, right?
Yeah.
All right. Any other thoughts or comments before we head out to breakout room? Any thoughts? Yeah, David.
If you go back a slide where you mentioned the language,
Yeah.
and for those of you who know me, I worked in FinServ for 20 years, building very large systems. So I'm very deeply aware of all of the compliance and litigation and regulatory effects. But the key thing was, I learned a language at one company, and then when I flipped to the vendor side and I got to meet pretty much every single FinServ company, what was most amazing to me was I would use a word, they would nod their head, we'd have a full conversation, we'd go 10 minutes, 15, 20 minutes. And then I realized somehow that the word we were using, I was using it this way and they were using it that way. And we actually had no common understanding, even though we were using the same industry standard term. And so that's just something I caution, because people say, oh, let's build an index, let's build a dictionary. But, you really kind of have to ask people to explain, like, when you say ROI, how do you measure ROI? What do you mean by it? Because if you just keep going and going, you're going to commit to something and you're not committing to what they think you committed to.
Right.
I don't know if Talia and Ty both agree with that, but what I found was that's common across all industries. So insurance, same thing. I'd hire people from the insurance field and they'd go from one giant to another giant. And it's like, people say things like go from American English to British English, and everyone knows there's a couple really funny things where if you say something and the British will laugh at you and say, I don't think you meant to say that, because that's really, really amazingly offensive. But in any case, it's the sort of thing where you just have to kind of, be open to knowing that the language you're using is incorrect.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing too, when you think about when people are working in international, if you have an international company, whether you have international clients or if you're if your clients have international clients, right? And thinking about all of that and the impact that you can have, or the different types of cultures and language and the complexities with that, right? I know when I was in entertainment tech, we were going through a major shift and going through digitizing, content and trying to then actually insert ads, and every different vendor had a completely different proprietary system, and we had to do like a major project across the whole industry and come up with new technical standards and things like that in order to be, because what we did was we would take the content from the content providers and deliver it out to all of the platforms. And you couldn't do that if you didn't have some common standards, and you definitely couldn't help them stay in business and monetize it if they couldn't insert ads in a similar way, which is what we had to basically build in order to have, video on demand with ads in it today. You can, blame me for that basically. And I don't like ads, but I knew we had needed it to stay in business, right? So yeah, the things like that you find yourself doing as a CSM. Any other thoughts before we go out? All right, what we want to discuss in the breakout questions in our session: what is unique about an industry that you're most familiar with, and what is your biggest challenge for CS in your industry or company? Hey, so what kinds of things came up?
I think it was one of the things that came up that was a little different, unexpected, which I thought was cool, was talking about the differences that really happen, particularly when you have when you're working in enterprise, like enterprise customers. So people who have multi-tiers, so you might have the primary customer, but underneath that is like facilities and subsets and affiliates, and just the complexity that kind of comes with those structures. And then we don't really talk about that when we talk about simple SaaS often, is the complexities there.
Yeah, enterprise. I wonder though, in terms of enterprise, that certainly adds complexity and changes the nature of the stakeholders. Certainly a variable, and there's a difference in how you implement CS programs if you're working primarily with enterprise, or if you're working primarily, say, with SMBs, right? That sort of thing, right? So that's an interesting, we should add that as a variable.
I agree. I've only worked at enterprise, so it's all
you haven't?
It's all I've worked in.
Oh, that's all you've worked in is enterprise.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah, because it can be very different if it's SMB, mid-market.
Yeah, when people talk about SMB, I'm like, that sounds fun.
It has its own challenges, right?
Yeah.
They are completely different markets, and
Agreed.
often people struggle to switch from one to the other in ways you'd think that it would be easy, and it's not. I've mostly enterprise myself, but I've talked to customers at all levels, and it is so different. The only good news is work you do at the enterprise can be useful all the way down the stream. Work you do at SMB doesn't translate up. Work at enterprise does translate down.
Yeah.
Well, and also what I've noticed is that you might, the person that you sell to and is going to implement and is going to start using your product, like those can be, pretty much the same person, but they also are wearing 15 other hats, right? And so trying to get their time and getting on their radar, and that means you really have to make your tool very simple and easy to use, easy to adopt, right? Because otherwise it may just not happen, right? But I don't know, any other topics come up as people were discussing this in their breakout rooms?
We had the challenges of what happens when you go into some place, to an industry that has unions, and you have to deal with.
That's an interesting. I would love to hear that conversation.
It was kind of, like we didn't even think about it until we started to think about it.
What sort of industries have a lot of union?
Transportation, logistics.
Well, we were talking healthcare, right? Because the three of us all have some kind of healthcare background, and so
Education.
we talked about it there. But education, anything that has a warehouse probably has a union. Except
I've
for
never
Amazon.
negotiated in that space. I would love to hear that conversation though.
Hotels.
But it does bring up a whole new set of challenges
Oh.
because the roles are not a lot of the time defined, right? Tali said that she worked with one where the role itself, they couldn't leverage people in the way that they had originally planned because it wasn't part of their job description. And it wasn't as if we could just say, oh, look, we can broaden your horizons by giving you this new fun task.
Nope.
It was, no, I'm sorry, it's not clearly defined in this job description. We can't use them. We have to find an alternative way to do something that we just spent the last 3 months planning. And now we have to kind of, right? And so, and that's true. And I brought up the same thing. If you're global, that work councils in Germany and France have some of that same type of
Absolutely.
issue.
Now
right?
that I've
You
dealt
have
with,
to-
yeah.
Right. And it's a huge challenge to have to deal with them because they're a little bit more defined and rigid in the way that they do things. And you have to be sometimes extra creative to make things work.
But it's the same problem, whether it's a union or whether it's
Right.
like if you're working with a law firm and you have to know that the paralegal that, like the way I explain it is it's like every touch point. You have to know how each touch point is going to react to what your product is. Because if the paralegal at the far end of your process refuses to use your product, the whole thing's worthless.
Right.
Like, it's like any of the way the analogy I use is it's a key. Every ridge in the key has to go in the lock and it has to match the tumbler. They're all at different heights, but every single one has to match because if one doesn't match, the key won't turn.
That's interesting. And what were the other, I haven't worked with a company that has clients in Germany. You're saying are they work councils?
Work councils.
Okay.
Yeah, work council.
All right, I want to
Employee-
add this in.
There's a lot of countries globally that have just very strict and fastidious things around labor. So I mean, like I talked to you offline about, Jan, but it is
Yeah.
crazy.
Essentially, it's not management telling employees how to do something. The employees have
government,
a
yeah.
vote too. And so,
Yeah, I'm familiar with unions. That's
no, it's
But work-
different than unions.
Yeah, work
It's-
councils are
different.
kind of the same thing. Yeah, work councils are kind of the same thing as a union in the US. They're just, again, with a
Little-
German twist, right? With a German
Yeah.
twist.
Love that. Any other last thoughts or things that we should be adding in? Because what we're going to do is this, the variables and the kind of what's standard versus what the variables are. We're going to use that as the format for what kinds of ways that we explore and discuss each industry now going forward. So what we need to do now actually is make certain that we have all of that. So I'm trying to take all those notes, but then also we'll need, if you have an expertise, or you've worked in as a CSM or CS leader in an industry, we want you to sign up to help facilitate. We want to have at least 5 to 10 CSMs and CS leaders for each of these industries. And would love to have you to help us, help each other understand and exchange best practices, maybe share what sort of exchange ideas on how you've met certain challenges, as well as then we encourage you to join in, even if it isn't your industry that you have experience in, because what I've found is that I learn as much about my own expertise when I learn from something that I have no experience in, right? And that comes also when you're learning across industry. So I hope that you'll be able to come throughout the series, and then we can all go out and be consultants and coaches, right? Because we'll be adept at every industry that CS is engaged in. And if nothing else, as you continue to work in the industry that you're in, you will have. Trevor, was there something? Oh, okay. But if there's whatever industry you're in, you might get some ideas. you might say, oh, wow, this is a big challenge for them. And it's a challenge for me in a different way, but I could use some of those tactics or some of those approaches. So hopefully there'll be something for everyone in that.
I was just going to say, like, I plan to join the other ones because I might not be in that industry, but I'll have customers eventually that are or currently are. So me understanding their landscape better is a plus for me. So I see all these sessions as valuable.
Nice. Great.
True.
Excellent. And if there's anything else that I don't have in as sort of like, what's the foundation versus the variables, please, put it over in the Slack or DM me or, raise your hand before we go. I definitely want to hear it. Oh, the Slack community. Thank you, Pritesh. I didn't realize it was your first. So yeah, if you go to the CxXchange, so let me type it in, CxXchange.com. All of the links and all of the information, everything is there. And if you can also see our industry series page that is brand new as well, if you explore there. So thank you so much, everybody. Just really appreciate just such a great turnout in a holiday week to launch our industry series. I'm excited to get this kicked off once we get it all organized. In the meantime, we'll be discussing lots of other topics until we get the industry series organized. And so we look forward to seeing you each week, and we'll see you all soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Bye,
you.
everyone.
Bye, everyone.
everyone.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Thank you so much for tuning into this week's episode of Success Hour, formerly known as CS Office Hours. We regularly put out new content, so to be the first to know, like this episode, tap that notification bell, hit that subscribe button, and we look forward to seeing you soon.